Oh,
Hi everyone, and welcome to week 4 of Training Tuesday. Don't worry, we're not starting just yet. We're just going to do a run through beforehand. Just a quick housekeeping check that the presentation slides for today's course is available to download at the top right hand corner. If you did want to make the video any bigger, there's a play button at the bottom. If you hover over them, it does actually say. And you can also download the chat log at the end. It's like an arrow pointing downwards. So, Carolyn, what do you think were the key takeaways from last week?
I think it's down to the individual really what they think is most applicable to them. But hopefully there's quite a lot of stuff in there that's personal that they can learn about their own preferences. We did quite a lot thinking about extroversion and introversion and judging and perceiving, and we talked about the concept of 360 feedback. So I hope that kind of inspired people to kind of go out and ask some questions and gather some data maybe about themselves, because it's all about a continuous improvement journey. None of us is perfect, and you don't have to be ill to get better. It's all that kind of thing that you've got to be open to this stuff, I think, a lot of the time. So we talked quite a lot about personal credibility as well, and how that comes from your words and your actions and your reputation. And unless you know what people think about you, it's hard to understand if that really matches what you intend to put out to the world. And sometimes I think we're not strategic enough about planning that. I think kind of just go through life, taking day by day, and if we don't step back and think, what do I want people to describe me as when they think about me as a manager or leader, then we can miss a trick. And so we talk quite a lot about consistency as well. So that once you've got that strategic idea in your mind of who you want to be as a leader and manager, I think that helps you behave more consistently when you're under pressure, or you're having a bad day, or you're tired or hungry, or stuff going on. Says she who always gets hangry. Who I don't eat on time. Terrible. So yeah, I think when you know that about yourself, it's easier to manage it and to go, actually, I need to take myself out of this situation and come back when I'm in a more rational kind of state of mind. It's difficult, I think, when you're a manager and people just keep coming up, and it's very in the moment. I know you were talking last week about having a firefighting week, and it can be like that. And if you're hungry or tired or just that bit stressed, or it's not going to plan, you can say or do something that you then regret. So you say, if you strike when the iron's hot, you get burned. So it's good to sort of step back, I think, and just
Yeah.
reflect.
Yeah, I mean, I found obviously all of it was really interesting, but I think there was some good debate about the 360 feedback. We had kind of ones who do appraisals every 6 months,
Mm.
ones who get our HR team getting manager feedback for our annual reviews. Um, a lot of people, one of them was, I find it difficult in a contact centre about, as, sorry, team managers, as advisors, are always sceptical that questions aren't anonymous and therefore aren't always honest.
Mm.
How would you kind of go about, making sure that they are filling in good feedback?
Yeah, I think that's where having it online is really helpful, and having it run by a third party is helpful, not just trying to kind of say, oh yes, we'll sell you 360, but you could do it yourself on SurveyMonkey or something like that, where you can make the link available and people can go and log on and fill it out, and that way it's impartial. Because if I send it in an email to, even if it's being collected by HR, you can always kind of track who that came from. So I think making it anonymous, truly anonymous, is really important.
Yeah. So who would be the people that you'd ask for feedback?
In terms of kind of the population within the contact centre, if I
Yeah.
was a manager, I would ask 5 advisors as a minimum. I'd ask 5 other team managers, coaches at the same sort of level as me, and 5 people from the senior tier as well. So that might be the contact centre manager or finance director or technology director or whoever. But people who know me well enough to be able to evaluate my performance at work is quite important.
And what if you're part of a small team?
Yeah, I mean, if you've only got a small team, you can only ask who you can get to, but it doesn't always just have to be limited to your own organisation. It could be people that you worked with in a previous job as well, if you're doing that. As long as it's not so far in the past that they can't remember who you are, or you only worked with them a tiny amount. They've got to know your work pretty well. And know you as a person quite well for the feedback to be valuable. Otherwise, they might politely fill out some things, but you won't get real value from it, and they'll put quite a lot of can't say, don't know, kind of not applicable answers to questions. I normally ask about 30 to 40 questions in a 360.
And what sort of, I mean, obviously we can't go into 30 or 40 questions, but what would you ask, as a top 3 maybe?
I usually would ask something around communication as a priority. So, do I give people feedback, good and bad feedback, or do I shy away from that? Is my communication timely and clear, and that kind of stuff is quite important. I'd probably ask something about strategy at a leadership level. So, am I connected to the strategy of the business? Am I translating that down to my own team? That's really quite important. And in recent years, I'd probably be really focusing on how we are in terms of change, and what is my approach as a leader to change, and how do I translate that to my team and support them through change. That's been a massive theme for a lot of our clients recently. But it kind of depends on what the competencies are for a manager within each organisation, which should be linked to the culture and strategy and direction of that particular organisation, and therefore what's important to them. So for one of our clients, which is in housing, a big part of what they were about was kind of ethics and doing the right thing. So we then wrote a section of questions around that to look for evidence that their managers are demonstrating that and role modelling it.
And so there was lots of debate about, do you think you're a J or a P? I mean, yeah. I know that I've shared it with all my friends. In case people have forgotten, what are they to do with then?
Oh, so J is about being organised and how you like to live your life. So it stands for judging, and it's not going on lastminute.com holidays, and it's about doing your work with time to spare and in methodical steps over time. And P, the perceiving, is much more kind of spontaneous and free and last minute, and very different, but they're both effective, just in different ways. And it can be quite stressful when you're one preference and you're working with somebody who's the other, because the J's are going, have you done it yet? Have you done it yet? Have you done it yet? And the P's are stressing the J's out, going, oh, I'll do it tomorrow, it'll be fine, chill out. So it's an interesting dynamic. It's interesting at home as well, because we always say you quite often get a J with a P. Because otherwise, if you get two J's together, they'd kill each other about which way the beans face in the cupboard. And if you get two P's together, they would just live in a pigsty. So you kind of need a bit of yin and yang, a bit of balance to that. Yeah.
Brilliant. Right. Well, hi everyone. We've reached the top of the hour. In case you just joined us, we were reflecting a bit of last week. Just a bit of housekeeping in case you missed it at the start. At the top of the chat room in the right-hand corner, you can download today's presentation slides. These will be sent to you later on today. You can download the chat log, so everything that's been discussed in the chat room can be downloaded with the, there's a button at the bottom with a downwards arrow. And if you wanted to make the screens bigger, there's a play button that makes the video and everything bigger, in case you want to see us in widescreen. So, Carolyn, what are we discussing today?
We're going to look at call and contact centre management skills today. So we're going to be thinking kind of more operationally today. We spent quite a bit of time thinking about leadership and management skills and people skills and personality traits and things like that. So we're going to be getting into some of the kind of more functional elements of the role today. But before we do, it'd be really good to kind of have a reflection on some of the work we've done so far. see where people are at with it, because as you may know, at the end of this session I'm going to be giving you an optional assignment to do, and it really is going to be for you to choose what to focus on, but it is about thinking, what have you got from this programme? This is kind of, you know, the penultimate session. So hopefully you've had quite a lot of takeaways so far. Hopefully you've experimented a little bit with some of those. So in terms of reflections and results from today, it would be really good to get into the chat room some of the things that you've applied already, because if we do this now, it will help you when it comes to the end to start thinking about what you might focus on if you're going to do the assignment. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, Rachel, at the moment, or save it to the end. It's up to you.
Well, I'm just going to type it into the chat room and see if anyone has applied anything that they've been learning.
Okay.
I know that I've been sharing the J&P thing from last week with friends and family, who all say I'm a very big J, so hugely organised.
Yes.
No
yeah.
fly.
See, I thought it was Jonty that was always completely organised, but actually I think you're kind of working the puppet strings, aren't you, behind the scenes, making sure that call centre helper runs really smoothly. So yeah, that was good to see. Yeah, so just to have a think, if you are going to do the assignment, obviously we're stopping for a week next week, which gives you 2 weeks to work on it before we meet back up. And if you've attended all the sessions and you've done the assignment, then you get the certificate of completion for this program. So I think, you know, it's definitely something to do if you can make the time to do it, not only for the certificate, but also because it will give you that real kind of opportunity to sit down and think about what it is you've learned and got out of it, because otherwise slotting in an hour and turning up is one thing, but actually how you reflect on it and apply it and change behaviour and try different things is where the real value comes. So it'd be good to see if there are some reflections on it so far.
I think Kelly's just typing in something, so I'll let you know.
Excellent. And so while we're doing that, hopefully you've all got the booklet as well for today, and that you've printed that off, because there's again an opportunity to fill this out. And when you go back to do your assignment, if you filled these booklets out as you've gone along, then they will help you. You probably find there's whole chunks of stuff that you might then be able to pull into your assignment. There's no kind of word count on the assignment. It's entirely up to you how short or long that document is, but it needs to be, you know, structured and written in a way in which I can read it and follow it and understand what you've learned, what you've done with it, how you've applied it, and what you've got from it. So you're telling me a story basically about what's going on in your workplace and how you're using this and what's happened. So well, I'll make a start on going through the aims and the objectives for this particular session, and then if we've got any reflections and results, I'll take those before we move into the main content. Because today's session, as I've said, is quite an operationally focused one. What I talk about in this session is industry general, so you might say actually our focus is not on AHT, on average handle time, it's purely on customer experience, customer satisfaction, and other people might say no, actually average handling time is really important to us. Customer satisfaction still is, but we have to keep both. So there's no right or wrong in what I'm going to share with you. It's just going to be things that you want to be aware of wherever you work. If you're in this industry, these are the things that are important. So I'm going to go over the 3 things that you must know to effectively manage a contact centre function, which is quite a challenge to think about distilling it down into the 3 top things, because there are so many things that are important. So I've cheated a little bit, but we'll go through that.
Carolyn, just to let you know, the slides haven't moved on at the moment. So I'm just seeing. Oh, there we go. Okay. We're on objectives now. Brilliant.
Okay. We're going to then go through the contact centre performance measures, targets. So there's loads of different metrics that you might want to look at, KPIs. There's also going to be things that are going to be unique to you and your organisation. So it's great if you put those in the chat room and share them with everybody else, because it could inspire other thoughts. But I'm going to go through some of the most popular industry ones. There's lots of content on the call centre helper website on this stuff, so I've put some links at the bottom of your booklet, but by all means have a look and see about lots of other things on there. We're going to think about some of the common challenges operationally of running a call centre function. Technology will come into some of this that I'm going to talk about as well. And also things that we've got to do to make sure we get the balance right. And this is where we're kind of bringing all of our 4 weeks to date together, because we've done quite a lot around the people element, the leadership element, and now we're thinking about the technology element and the operational side. So when you start to put that all together, you end up with a well-rounded contact centre manager. So that's the purpose of what we're going to do. So there is some space in your booklets on page 2 to think about what you would like to get from this. You know, if there's any burning questions that you've got in this area, I'd love to hear those, and also your reflections, particularly from the last session, but also from the whole programme now. It's useful to start thinking about that in view of your assignment coming down the line.
Yeah, Kelly said in the chat room, I've got some one-to-ones this week with my team, so I'm looking to find out whether they class themselves as a J or a P. I'm also planning to fill in those dartboard charts so we can talk through the results of those.
Excellent.
And she says using a lot of good things from the sessions we've had so far. So that's really positive. Yeah,
excellent. So if, Kelly, you write that up once you've had those one-to-ones about what happened, then that's your assignment done. So that'd be really good. We'd like to hear about the application of that Thrive model, the dartboard 7 C's model, and definitely what it exactly is that you've tried and implemented and what's worked or not worked, and that would be the content of the assignment. So it's very kind of anecdotal what you're writing. It doesn't have to be all university language, very operational and simple, but it'd just be really good to see the evidence, and then we can give you your certificate. Okay, so let's have a think about these 3 things that you must know. And again, there's space in your workbooks on page 3 for you to write this down. So I have, like I say, cheated a little bit because we're going to start off quite broad. So the first thing we're going to think about is you must know what it is you want to measure. So you need to know what your goal is for your operation. What is the purpose of your contact centre? What are you there to do? Are you there to serve? Are you there to sell? Is it both? Are you just simply there to support? What is it that you're there to do? So if I know what I'm there to do, I can then decide what is most important for me to measure. When I've got that, I can then think about how I want to measure that. So what is it that I'm going to look for to be able to measure that goal? And then lastly, I need to think about how I want to improve that. So it's all well and good getting the data, getting that information, but if I don't then do something with it and have an action plan for improvement, then I'm just data collecting. And this is a massive error that I see lots of contact centres falling into. They produce reports and collate Excel spreadsheets with all these tabs and colours and all this stuff going on, and they email it to the senior team every week religiously, and nobody looks at it, nobody does anything with it, nobody really kind of takes any action or pulls any themes or threads out from a more kind of deeper insight perspective. It doesn't really drive anything. It's like saying, you know, I'm doing my job and, you know, we're still here and we're still ticking along, but it's not creating a continuous improvement culture. So that's definitely something we want to avoid, and I'll talk later about some of the things to avoid with this. So when we've got that stuff together, we might want to think in terms of what it is and how I'm going to measure it. Definitely types of volumes that you're getting. So what channels are they coming through? So again, it'd be good to get your conversations in the chat room. Which channels are you using? Which channels are most popular? You know, we've seen quite a lot of uptake in live chat in recent years. Obviously, social media has exploded onto the scene as well. We're seeing a little bit of email dropping away in some sectors, but others are hanging on to it quite firmly. So there's no right or wrong in terms of what you should be doing as a multi-channel strategy, but it's important for you to think about your own customer demographic and what it is that they want and what direction is that demographic going in. So I was with a client last week who's a very well-established British brand, and I sat and did some call listening, and on the screen the advisor has a few fields to fill out, one of which is kind of take an email address and the other is kind of take a mobile phone number. And I would say 50% of all those callers were sweet little old ladies who said, oh no, I don't have an email address, and oh no, I don't have a mobile phone number. So for them, they're unlikely to be getting into live chat and email with those customers. Voice is still going to be a huge part of their business. But going forward, they're looking to attract a younger demographic customer into their base, and they will need to think about their multi-channel strategy to support them, because obviously smartphone usage is growing massively. So definitely think about the volumes and the types, and then what's your forecasting strategy so that you can really resource well. And obviously planning is a whole other discipline. Hopefully you've got a specialist planner and it doesn't all just fall on your shoulders as a manager. But this is where you must know and be able to track and anticipate your volumes to feed your forecasting strategy. And that's leading us to think about workforce management. So obviously when we look at workforce management, we're thinking about measuring, agent availability, how much time they're spending in Make Busy or wrap time, whatever you want to use it as, and how much are they actually available. Because when we've got the forecasting wrong, then we're going to end up obviously with customers on hold for long periods, which just aggravates the situation and it makes life more difficult for your advisors. And then once they're on the phone, they spend the first 30 seconds whinging about how long they've been on hold, which also then adds to your AHT, and everything just takes longer. So we really want to get these basic metrics right in order to be successful. Then we want to think about customer experience or user experience. So absolutely, kind of looking at the satisfaction and things like customer effort score, how easy it is to do business, that those sorts of things are really important. But we've got to get a balance between customer experience and efficiency. So there's no point giving a fantastic customer experience and it takes 9 minutes to go through all our different products with you, Mrs. Customer, if you then don't actually convert and buy anything. So that's really inefficient. So we need to, we'd go out of business if we were doing that all the time. So we need to think about controlling call durations, making sure that they are efficient and that we're converting if that's part of your remit, whether it's cross-selling, upselling, taking orders, whatever that might be, classing that as conversion. Then we want to think about quality, and there's loads of debate on quality at the moment. It's a real hot potato. I know Call Centre Helpers run lots of webinars on this to kind of get some best practice about what we mean by quality in 2016. So we're moving massively away from Excel spreadsheets and percentage scores and tick boxes and that kind of yes, no stuff. I absolutely tear my hair out when I go into client organisations and I look at their quality score sheets, and it's got things like you must say this at the beginning and you must say this at the end in order to pass the call. And I'm all for consistency and brand voice, but when we start dictating that you're going to fail your call quality if you didn't say, is there anything else I can help you with at the end of the call, that's rubbish. Why does that mean quality? Because somebody's decided that. It's about kind of the quality of the conversation now between that advisor and that customer. So quality to me should always have some customer experience CSAT data feeding into it, because the person who decides that's a good quality call to me is the customer. So before I get on my high horse too much about quality, you can tell I'm quite passionate about that, we're going to think about compliance. So this is still obviously part of where we would say, okay, pass or fail, because if I don't protect the data of that customer, or I don't read Financial Conduct Authority dictated scripts to let people know their rights about cancelling an insurance policy within the cool-off period, then that's naughty and that's not okay. So we still need to make sure that we're measuring compliance and that is accurate, and that just needs to be trained appropriately, and that the systems support your advisors to remind them with what to say at the right point. But does it actually need to be word for word as it is on the script? You know, it's a big debate. I think one of the important things is making sure your advisors bridge in to a compliance section quite fluently and then bridge out of it quite naturally, so that they'll use phrases that let the customer know, okay, there's some official information I need to share with you now, and so I might just kind of read that to you if that's okay. So you just kind of, otherwise they're talking and then they suddenly go into robot mode and it's like, what just happened? And all the rapport's lost. So definitely think about how you're measuring the success of compliance alongside quality. And then we want to also think about reporting and influencing. So this is where we're going to bring it all together and we're going to collate it into a report that people can interpret easily. So, you know, one pages, pie charts, dashboards, traffic lights, you know, that kind of stuff. And then how you influence other people. So what are the takeaways from that? Can you sum that up in a few lines? And what does that mean? What are we asking for? What needs to happen to keep moving in the right direction? And that might be internally, or it might be we need to look at different processes, or we need to have conversations with third parties, whatever that might be. But there needs to be some influencing, quite often coming out of the contact centre to other parts of the business with this data. So I'm going to go through some stuff on influencing right at the end of today's session. So I'm just going to pause for breath and just let you guys take stock of where we're at in terms of metrics in your world. And if you've got any questions, reflections, thoughts on what I've just shared, what is it that you're focusing on in terms of metrics that's working really well for you? Is there anything that you've kind of decided doesn't represent fairly? Average handling time always gets a bad reputation. I still think it's a very valid metric. It's about how we use it that's really key. It's got to be there from a forecasting and planning perspective, but we don't want to be beating advisors too rigidly with targets on handle time. But what is it that's working well for you or not?
I've got a few people typing in the chat room at the moment, so we'll see. John T said average handling time is not great as an agent metric.
Yeah,
you're a big fan.
Yeah, I mean, and this is why I'm just such a dinner party star. You know, everyone wants to sit next to me and talk about average handling time over soup. It's really difficult. Like, I've had some clients come back to me and they've said, you know, we've taken AHT off our agent desktops and off the wall boards because we want them to focus on the user customer experience. We want them to have, you know, personalised, good quality conversations, really build the rapport and not worry about whether it takes 300 seconds or 800 seconds. It takes as long as it takes. And that's fabulous. I love that because I'm all about personalisation and tuning into each individual customer. The problem happens when, over a period of time, we take our eye off that AHT ball and suddenly all our calls are taking longer, not just the ones that needed to take longer. And so then I've had clients come back and say, actually, you know, that was really fashionable a couple of years ago to do that, but it's now biting us on the bottom, and we're finding that it's costing to serve a heck of a lot more than it did, and our wait times have gone up, and we've got customers getting on the phone really angry because they've been on hold on a premium kind of rate number, and they're not enjoying that experience, funnily enough. So it's about not necessarily putting that back into the mix, but taking some time to talk to the advisors and explain why we need to control conversations and also where they don't need to work so hard. So when I listened to calls with that particular client, I found that some of their longer standing advisors were sharing information with customers that the customer hadn't asked for, didn't need, didn't want. And it was almost like the more they know, the more they talked. And it just confused the customer a lot of the time, and it was inappropriate, didn't actually build rapport. The customer was like, right, okay, scratching their head, why are you telling me that? But okay. And all the time it's inefficient, and there's customers queuing, and it was costing my client more money. So I still think there is room to have a conversation at agent level about AHT and efficiency, but I would never want to be beating them over the head with a big stick and putting them under pressure to stick to certain things, because there's different AHT should be for different call types as well. It's got to be a smart metric. Not when you start averaging averages, then you get into trouble. So
yeah, I think, well, I mean, obviously that's one way. Junty kind of disagreed and said AHT encourages agents to hurry through a call rather than addressing all of the customer issues. But I suppose there's kind of two edges to it.
And this is where this is good. Yeah, this is great. I love the debate on it. And this is where your multi-channel strategy and your self-service strategy need to really tie in. So there's one particular great example, which is British Gas, who created YouTube videos on how to stop your pipes freezing in winter. And then instead of the agent going through how to stop your pipes freezing in winter with every customer, they said, you know, have you got access to the internet? If I send you this YouTube link, there's a video that you can watch which shows you how to do that. And it saved on the handle time. It was a better experience for the customer because they could actually watch it rather than be told it over the phone. And everyone's a winner. So I think, you know, there are ways in which you can start to help your advisors to still give information and have great conversations, but be smarter and more digital in the way in which we're doing that going forward. And that, I think, makes the job more enjoyable because I've got more variety as well. I'm not having to say that same script over and over again 80 times a day, how to stop your pipes freezing in winter. You know, that gets pretty boring, you know, by the end of the day. So, yeah.
Roxanne said, we use subscription pay up as a metric if our advisors sell and the customer stays with us after the trial period. She's also said, we also have a conversion as an advisor metric, but we also currently experience the issue where advisors feel if they talk for longer, their performance looks better. So we're back talking about AHT, and that the next call is a customer waiting and an opportunity, but not as a metric.
Yeah, and that's my point about taking it away. So I just think we still need to have, when we're doing our one-to-ones, I think we still need to have a conversation, which is, do you know how long on average you're taking compared to calls of similar nature handled by your peers? I think that's a healthy conversation to have. And it's back to thinking of how you can use introversion and extroversion and understanding that with your advisors, because the extroverted ones like to talk and they will talk more. So you can compare them with somebody who's a little bit more pull-led in their communication. So they'll say to the customer, is it helpful if I explain to you X, Y, Z, and let the customer tell you yes or no, rather than just what an extroverted person would tend to do, which is to launch into that description whether or not you've asked for it. So just helping your advisors get, you know, ambidextrous again, we're talking, you know, right-handed, left-handed, and also having an awareness of what calls are waiting, because if it's quiet and there aren't things in the queue, then fine. But if you can see that, then we might need to be a little bit smarter and think about how we keep things on track and don't waste time. So yeah, I'm still an AHT fan, and I always will be. Okay. Any other thoughts or reflections before I bombard you with metrics and bore you all to death?
I think bombard away.
Okay, I'm going to bombard you. Look, can you see? I'm going to send you loads and loads of different things, and you're going to try and stay awake. So to help you with that in your workbooks, actually, I've put some stuff on page 4. And so talking about some of the things that are important in terms of metrics. And we're going to go through these all very, very quickly, and again, rather than you having to write it all out, I've put quite a lot of information on page 5. Now let's have a think about the EOS metric. So I'll take it back because I'm just being facetious. And I'll give you the employee opinion survey. So this doesn't have to be an opinion survey, but it's any metric that shows how engaged your people are. Because we've talked a lot about employee engagement and the fact of unless your employees are engaged, you're not going to get good quality conversations happening with customers. Because if I hate my job, that's going to come through, and I'm also going to take that out on customers at times. So let's start with that as a basic foundation, and we need to think about how we can continuously keeping our employees engaged and improving what it feels like to work for you. So that's important. So that's going to bring us back to thinking about the contact centre environment, which we talked quite a lot about in recruitment and retention. Then we start to think about metrics like NPS. So I'm sure you're all aware of NPS, Net Promoter Score, and what that means. There's it's been fashionable, hugely fashionable, and for a while I was a little bit skeptical about it, I'll be honest. But now, several years down the line, we're seeing really great evidence of financial links, of financial performance between high NPS scores and companies really doing well on the bottom line. So yeah, NPS is definitely still a good one to keep your eye on. The new kind of kid on the block following on that is kind of your net easy score, or customer effort score, as it previously was kind of incarnated to start with, thinking about how easy or what the effort was to do business with you. So obviously we want to keep effort that I have to put in as a customer down so that I keep coming back to you. We've always talked about kind of good service is no service, so that silent service concept. When we're looking at RPC, again, this is cost to serve, so we're thinking about that revenue per contact. So do you know what it actually costs for you to handle these conversations, and therefore what you're making from each one? So we look at CPC, cost per contact, and RPC is revenue per contact. So when we're looking at conversion, this is really helpful, so that I can, we were talking there about a subscription renewal, so that would be a revenue from that contact. So what does that average out at? When we look at SLAs, we're talking about service level agreements. So that is usually a very popular metric with outsourcers, but it could also be about how we serve different departments internally, and what we're agreeing. So sometimes, we'll have these kind of SLAs as well about how quickly we answer calls, how many calls we answer, keep our abandonment rate down, and we might look at them as either SLAs or KPIs. AHT, so average handle time, which we've already talked about quite a lot, so I won't bang on about that anymore. Cost per contact, which I've already touched on. TNC, so that would be your total net conversion, so that's the number of opportunities that have presented, and how many of those you've actually converted to get your total net conversion. And CSAT, so that's your customer satisfaction score, so hopefully you're all doing some surveys, and if not, that's definitely something to do, post-call surveys, and this should feed into your quality score at an agent level, so that customer is letting you know what it felt like to talk to that individual agent. QFS is just a way of pulling together quality framework scores, so whether you do it as a percentage or a traffic light or a gold, silver, bronze, or whatever it is you do, what's the output from having conversations. Now, the real radical view about this at the moment is not to have any quality framework score, just have a conversation, because that's where the behaviour change happens, from that conversation, that coaching conversation. So that's quite hard to do culturally, I think, for a lot of contact centres, and especially those that are either FCA regulated and they need to report that they're having these quality conversations and these are the scores from them, or whether they're got third-party service agreements, and again they're reporting back to their customers about how successful they've been in handling those contacts from a quality perspective. So it's quite a kind of radical one, but definitely I'm leaning to my clients, moving them more away from percentages and at least more to holistic banding on the end of their quality framework. So yeah, quite popular with the traffic lights and the kind of gold, silver, bronze stuff at the moment. Okay, the next one would be FCR, so first contact resolution. Again, there's a lot of debate about what actually constitutes first contact resolution, and that is down to you to decide in your organisation what that means, because for a lot of places you can't resolve it in that first initial contact. It has to go to other areas. So at what point do you close that ticket down and say it's done? So it's something to keep a handle on, though, because it's massively linked to customer effort, because naturally the better your first contact resolution, quite often the better your effort score will be, and it will also reflect on your CSAT then as well. WFM, which we've touched on, so anything to do with agent utilisation, shrinkage, after call work, make busy, get ready, all those things. How much time are they spending in those different states? It's quite important to keep an eye on that so that you can forecast accurately. I also want to have conversations with certain advisors if they're spending far longer in those areas than they should, and they've got less talk time than their peers. What's that about? Is that agreed? Is that okay? Or are they dodging doing the actual meat of the work of the call handling? So that's a kind of like whistle-stop tour on all the different things, by no means exhaustive list. I hope you're all still awake.
Yeah, we've just been discussing in the chat room, do people use these metrics? Okay. And Caroline said we look at EOS and NPS, and Kelly said we use EOS, which we call 11 questions, and we use NPS too. We monitor AHT, QFS and WFM. And then I also asked, do you do any customer satisfaction surveys? And Caroline said our issue with CSAT is that often the negative comments refer to the service issue rather than the service from the specific agent. So how would you get around that?
That's still really valuable data. So this is, we want to remove frustrations from customers at the root cause. So if that's coming through the contact centre, this is why contact centres should be the beating heart of the business, because they're gathering this information that other areas need to know about, and this is where the reporting still needs to happen, and it needs to go to those areas and be flagged, and we need to have the influencing skills to get them to see what it is they might need to do differently. So I think that's really powerful information, and as a manager in a contact centre, this is where your ability to network and to be respected and to be involved with the other people around that boardroom table and their areas is really key. So yeah, that's valuable, still really good.
Kelly said we used to do CSAT a long time ago, and it's something I want to add back in the future. And Jamie said we're looking to introduce QFS using self-assessment, having agents listen to calls themselves.
Perfect. Absolutely advocate that. I think too often we just kind of sit them down and say, right, here's your feedback, I've listened to this call. And what I would like to get to in every single contact centre is a culture where advisors listen to their own calls, score their own, and they flag to their manager the ones that they want to have support with. I think quite often they come in to have a one-to-one and they're hoping that their manager has picked a good call. Well, that's not how it should be, because there's not an awful lot of value. You can still say, oh, well done, and keep doing the same things, but the real value can come from where I can learn how to be even better if. So if I, as an advisor, I'm in a supportive culture, and I've just had a really tough call because maybe the customer was downright rude and horrible to me, and I've taken that quite personally and I've found it really difficult and draining, I want to be able to press a button on my system that flags that to you as my manager, and it says Carolyn would like you to listen to this call and for this to be part of our next one-to-one. So that's definitely where we want to be with it. So there's all sorts of fabulous cloud-based scorecarding software that you can use to kind of build your own scorecards, your own quality frameworks, and that you can, your advisors can then tap into those in real time, listen to a call and fill it out, and then send that to you as the manager, and you can listen and compare and give your kind of opinion on that. But then you also want to be pulling in the customer's feedback as well. What did that customer think of that call? Because the advisor might be beating themselves up about it, but the customer thought, actually, it was brilliant and you answered all my questions. And maybe I came on a bit ratty, but by the end of it I was all right. So you want to balance it and get all of that information together. Yeah, that's good. Okay. Any other thoughts, questions?
No, that's it so far.
Okay, lovely. So absolutely, when we start looking at all of that, it's like, oh my goodness, you could just have a full-time job looking at data and trying to look at, how did we do last week? How did we do this week, last month, last year? Where do we want to be next month? What does that mean? And this is why when I walk into a lot of contact centres as a consultant, I kind of look around and I see the team managers sat there with their noses up against their screens and they're like working on their computers. And to me, that's a bit of a shame, because that's when they're not having the conversations that the data should point them to with their advisors that actually help to change and improve those metrics going forward. So if we're not careful, then we end up with what I call metric mayhem. So it kind of just becomes overload and we end up measuring everything but not doing anything with it, and that is a trap to avoid. So it's worth thinking about how you're pulling all of this information together. What software are you using? You shouldn't be doing this manually. Your system should be able to churn out reports for you at the touch of a button. And if they're not, then maybe it's time to think about investing in some new technology to help you with that. So I've got a question really now for you guys to sort of sit back and reflect and to pop into the chat room your thoughts. What is your organisation trying to achieve? So kind of thinking about, where is the priority focus? Is it sales conversion? Is it to give good customer service? What is it that you're there to do? What's the purpose of your contact centre? And how does that fit with what your organisation is trying to achieve? Is it trying to be the biggest and the best in a certain area, so therefore it's about selling more and loyalty, and what is it that's the priority? That's going to be very different if you're a public sector contact centre. So at the moment I'm working with some 999 emergency services. Well, they're not trying to sell anything, or they're trying to give good customer service as such, but again it's a little bit different. They probably say the priority focus is to save lives. So it's about understanding what your organisation is really trying to achieve. So it'd be good to get some reflections on that.
Yeah, we've got Kelly typing in at the moment, so I'll let you know what she says.
Okay, so there's some space on page 6 of your booklets for you to kind of just reflect on that and to think that through, because what 3 metrics you then put as your priority ones should underpin what you're trying to achieve as a business, as an organisation.
Yeah, Kelly said great quality and conversion, motivating individuals and employee retention.
Okay, so if those were the things that Kelly's focusing on, when we look at these next questions, which are what are the 3 most important metrics for you today to measure, what would those be? So read me her list again.
So great quality and conversion.
So we're going to be looking at conversion score and quality framework score possibly there, yeah?
Motivating individuals and employee retention.
Okay, so we want to be looking at our employee engagement, our EOS scores there. And was there one more?
Employee retention.
Okay, so again we might look at our attrition rate and feed that also into some WFN metrics, because if our agent utilisation, actually we're not looking for a perfect kind of 100% on that either, because that's really quite stressful. I would be looking at kind of agent utilization, anything 80% upwards. You've got to build in your shrinkage to that, but also I want to give them a little bit of breathing space in between calls, even if it's 30 seconds or whatever, because it's just about the fact that they are humans and not robots. So even though I've built in breaks and all that kind of stuff, I don't want to hammer them relentlessly. I want to get good utilization. I don't want them sat there twiddling their thumbs for blocks of time, but it's about getting that balance right. So you can start to look at how retention and employee engagement fit with WFM. So it all starts to come together and give you a good picture.
Jamie said, resolve customer issues to get them using our service again as quickly as possible with a good customer experience and minimal user effort. Sorry.
Okay, good. So we'd be looking maybe for looking at your customer experience or user experience data. So that might come into NPS as well, and CSAT and customer effort score. And then we might want to be looking at either conversion or some kind of customer retention metric as well. Because this is where, for me, contact centres need to also work quite well with marketing functions. Because if the marketing department are putting all their budget and all their effort into attracting new customers, but yet we're not given the tools and the technology to support those customers effectively, so when they ring the contact centre or email in, there's long wait times, negative experience, then they don't come back. And yet we're putting all our budget into all these sassy advertising campaigns, and actually we need to give the contact centre more budget so that they can resolve and retain customers. And obviously things like fixing the service chain as well, if there's issues in the service chain that are causing these complaints. But there's no point just attracting customers if we don't retain them. It's like putting them on an escalator, but they just drop off like lemmings at the top. So
brilliant.
Okay.
Yeah, Jamie's actually just replied and said, for us, end customers don't have a choice being our customer or not, so we can't measure customer retention or conversion.
Ah, what industry is that again, Jamie? What is it? Because this is reminds me of some work I did with the police, which was helping their 111 team. So it was non-emergency work, and what we found was that the police officers were in that department doing that 111 call handling. It wasn't their preferred thing. They'd got like a sprained ankle running after a robber, and they had to sit and take calls for 6 weeks while their ankle healed up, and they were like, oh God, I hate this bit, so it became this centre, they called it, for the sick, lame and crazy, right? So it was where you went if you were recovering from some kind of trauma or injury. And what we found was they weren't seeing victims as customers. And there was that mantra, well, what are you going to do? If you don't like it, we are the police, it's tough. But there was still some work to do to help them to understand that actually they quite often were blasé about low-level crime because they see much worse all day, normally every day. But to that individual customer, the fact that their child's bike had been stolen was a big deal. It was really traumatic. So there was still quite a lot of work to do, even though those customers had no choice but to contact that department, and that those people handling that call were a bit like, well, what's your problem? It's not that bad. It's not, nobody's died. It's just your bike got nicked. You should lock it up better, or did you put the barcode, your postcode on it? No, well, that's your fault then. So there was a bit of that, and there's still some work to do around employee engagement and customer satisfaction, even in areas like that.
Yeah, Jamie's actually said their student ISP. Our clients have a choice, but we're then exclusive to the students.
Right. Okay. I think there will still be, there'll be some mindset work to do, I guess, still. You want those students to rate that experience highly, even if you can be quite blasé and say, well, where are you going to go if you don't like it? And ultimately, as the provider, if that student satisfaction isn't high enough, then potentially you could lose the contract, I guess, or it could go somewhere else, or it could be outsourced or something different if there was a lot of dissatisfaction with the survey. So I'm kind of thinking about generally 3 areas that I would say tend to be top priorities. So I've talked about employee engagement being the baseline. If you're going to get anywhere decent, your staff have got to be in that good place. Satisfaction and loyalty, so making sure that your customers or users, whether they have a choice to use you or not, are finding that that is a good experience for them. And then that we're handling it efficiently, so the cost per contact, and making sure we're getting a good multi-channel strategy that is efficient. So that example I gave you with British Gas, they saved millions of pounds by putting that YouTube video on to save it on talk time. So there are smart things that we can do with kind of very little effort sometimes to make a massive difference. And that then keeps feeding back into employee engagement, because now I'm not bored having to repeat that same script all day every day. The customer's more satisfied because they've had a choice about how they access that information, and that's feeding back and making me more efficient and saving me time and money. So that's what we want to be doing in terms of our strategy for our contact centre, and our metrics are really going to help us drive that strategy, know where it is we want to focus, and then make sure that that's working well, and that we are then measuring and reporting on that correctly. We keep moving in that right direction, don't stand still. But there's a balance to achieve here, so we don't, as I've said, want to focus too much on just data and metrics and KPIs. We've also got to be connected to those human beings. That's why the employee opinion survey or employee engagement score should be one of the first things that you go to. So let's have a look at some of the most common contact centre challenges. And if you've got challenges that you're facing in your contact centre, then by all means pop it into the chat room. If I don't have time to answer the questions right now, I'll be staying online at the end, and I'll talk to you some more in the chat room afterwards. So I'm going to go through some of the things that I see happening time and time again, and these might not always be within your realm to control, but I'm hopefully going to help you to influence that. So one of the first things that I keep coming up against is legacy technology. So this is where either we've inherited systems, systems have been in place a long time, financially they've got to be written off over a long period of time before we can invest in new ones, but new technology is coming out all the time, and we decide actually now we do need to have a CRM, or we do need to have speech analytics, or we do need to have some other system that manages our own internal processes, or we need a knowledge management system, and we start tagging all these systems on bit by bit, and our advisors end up stuck in what I call alt-tab hell, where they're just flicking through screens at high speed trying to find all this different information. And it's actually, that does impact your AHT as well, because we're talking about optimizing the agent desktop here and making sure that they've got the information they need at their fingertips. So I think there is quite often an acceptance of legacy technology that sometimes we need to challenge, and that we could put a business case together to say, let's get a proof of concept, let's actually have a free trial of a system, and let's see if we can balance the books and write that off financially in a different way. So this links to point number 2, which is around underinvestment, because again I think sometimes the contact centre is still seen as the poor relation and a cost centre to the business, when actually it should be elevated as one of the most important parts of an organisation. We're about retaining customers, making sales, identifying problems for other parts of the organisation, so it definitely needs to be respected and invested in appropriately. Number 3 is about ivory tower syndrome. So I kind of make a living out of number 3, which is, I think, something I've said before, where I get quite passionate about the fact that a lot of senior managers don't spend time on the floor, and they don't listen to calls enough, and they don't spend enough time talking to advisors or running little focus groups. And so then they're making decisions in their ivory towers that aren't the right ones. and that's a real risk, and that's when we end up with systems that don't actually integrate well or work well, or processes that just hinder the advisor more than it helps them. So half of all the advisors that I ask say that the technology in front of them hinders them more than it helps them, which is pretty scary. And linked to the ivory towers is also the silos. So this is where the different parts of the business are all just working individually in their own little world, and they're not interconnected enough. So particularly when there's a service chain through the business to deliver the customer experience or service, and actually the contact centre isn't either well respected enough or integrated enough into those other parts. So we get marketing doing an advertising campaign which they don't tell the contact centre about, and suddenly you've volumes and your forecasting is thrown out of the window because they've done a TV campaign and not told you to expect more contact, or your advisors aren't respected when they're trying to ring through to other departments. They can see it's the contact centre calling and they just ignore the call. So it's about how we build relationships and we network and we actively promote the contact centre and the work that we do and the difference that we make to the other parts of the organisation. Number 5 is around measuring the wrong things. So if we are focusing on the wrong metrics that aren't linked to the strategy and the direction of the business, and we're gathering data, and number 6 is about then not acting on that data, then again we're just spending time and money doing an activity that isn't actually helping or driving us forward. I was with a client the other week who showed me their Excel spreadsheet where they were putting in anecdotal comments and tracking sentiment from emails, and they were pulling it all in to a spreadsheet, and then they were pulling out some highlights and sending that to the senior management team. Well, A, there's systems that can do that for them, they shouldn't need to do that manually, and B, when I said what's the impact of that report, what feedback do you get, what actions does it drive, it was like, well, not a lot, I just kind of send it and that's it, and I do it every week and they just know then that I'm doing my job. And to me that's just a waste of time. If nothing would change if you didn't do it, then we're wasting time and money there. So definitely think about how we link it through to a strategy. So to do that, quite often we need some good influencing skills, and these are 4 of the key factors of influence that I think everybody should know about. So if you want to look at these in more detail, then there's a book that I can recommend. I'll pop it into the chat room at the end. But if you think about when you last bought something, I guarantee that whatever it was you bought, I can put into one or more of these boxes as the reason why you bought it. So I haven't warned Rachel about this. I'm just going to spring it on her and ask her, what was the last thing that you bought? It could be anything. It could be like, a pair of jeans in the January sale, or
I just bought some new trainers for the gym.
Okay, excellent. And which ones did you buy and why?
I bought some pretty pink ASIC trainers because they were pretty.
Okay. And any reason why that brand?
I've got running trainers and they're really good, and I wanted more motivation for going to the gym.
Okay. Okay. So and did you read any reviews or anything? Where did you buy them from?
Amazon, as always. Yes. I mean, to be honest, I went on what they looked like, I'm sorry to say.
Okay.
And they were a good price, so yes.
Okay. So yeah, that's a lot going in the liking box there, isn't there, about them being pretty and pink and I liked them and all of that kind of stuff. And if we're reading and being influenced by the reviews on Amazon, then that tends to go into the social proof box because we look at what other people have said about the product. If they are on special offer, then that will fall into the scarcity box. If there's a discount or they're a limited edition style or something like that, That's the scarcity box. And then the reciprocation box is usually when you get something out of doing it. So what you were saying about I wanted more motivation to go to the gym, that's a reciprocation factor. It can also be if you buy something and you get loyalty points or you get a free gift or something like that, then that also falls into reciprocation. So this is used in selling an awful lot, and it's the crux of a lot of the content of our sales training. But it's also something that you should know about as a manager in how you're going to influence upwards. So you might say something about, well, our competitors are doing this, this, and this, and that would be an element of social proof. Or you might say, we can do this activity for a limited time because we're going into our quietest period. So that would be something around scarcity. You can build rapport, you can have good relationships with the people you need to influence and get them to genuinely know, like, and trust you, and that's getting into the liking box. Or you can almost negotiate. So within a service chain, I might say, I'm going to send you 6 contact centre agents that I want you to take out into the field and show them what it is you do, and equally I want you to send 6 technicians into my contact centre who are going to sit with my team and see what the impact is when technicians don't fill out their reports properly, and then a customer rings up, we've not got that information. So it's that give and take. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. So what this does is hopefully brings together all the things we've been talking about over the last 4 weeks. We've touched on lots of different areas, and it's about what it means to be a really good manager in a contact centre environment. You've got to have the skills, the knowledge, and the ability to do all these different activities. And this is where, you know, your assignment and your action plan for this week really come in. So part of the action plan for this particular session will be for you to think about your metrics. Hopefully I've given you quite a lot of food for thought around that, to think about what are you using, what are you reporting on, and is that working and resulting in action and change for you. But also your assignment now, so to choose one element of the training over the last 4 weeks and apply it. So whether you start doing exit interviews, or like Kelly was going to do, use the Thrive model in a one-to-one, see what happens. And just do that work over the next week, and then write up your findings of that. So again, just pop that into a Word document, email that to me, which is carolyn@real-results.co.uk. I've put that into your workbooks on page, I think it's the last page, yeah, page 9. And make sure that that's into me on or before the 23rd of February. I won't be giving you feedback, you know, on the session or anything, but what I would like you to do is have it done by then, so that you can put into the chat room some of the highlights that you've had, and kind of light bulb moments from doing that activity. So be prepared to discuss and share your outcomes. Obviously it doesn't have nothing commercially sensitive or anything, but certainly just what you've noticed, what you've seen, what you've felt, what you've heard. If you have got tangible metrics that you can say, yeah, conversion was at this and I did this feedback activity and now it's gone to here, brilliant. But we definitely want to get some feedback, and make sure you've had some headspace to apply, which is why we're not getting together next Tuesday. So yeah, how are we doing for time, Rachel?
You've got 2 whole minutes.
Oh wow, how luxurious.
I've shared my picture of my trainers, so everyone got to see the beautiful pink trainers.
It's a really interesting exercise to do in sales training. You know, it really helps people to understand, you know, and sometimes they'll say, oh, I bought a David Beckham aftershave or something like that, and that's social proof as well. You know, when we get celebrities or endorsements of products and services by other people, or we get recommended stuff by our friends, and increasingly that social proof element is becoming more and more powerful, which is why people will believe kind of Amazon reviews more than the actual marketing blurb that the company says, because of course you're going to say it's good, it's your product, but let's look at what other people actually say. So from a customer service perspective, that social proof is really one to be aware of, which is why NPS is so popular. Is, you know, would you recommend, how likely are you to recommend us to your friends and family? Because we know the power of social proof. It's really key.
Fab. Well, as Carolyn mentioned, we've got a week break next week, so there's no Training Tuesday next week, the 16th of February, but we'll be back on the 23rd of February. It's our final week, and the title's Review and Implementation Support Session. Yes, we look forward to seeing you then. Any final moments, Carolyn, about the assignment?
I don't think so. Just don't worry about it too much. It's not something that I want you to be stressing over whatsoever. It's literally just a brain dump onto a Word document of your thoughts and actions and what you've found. And I'm really looking forward to reading them.
Brilliant. Okay, well, that's all from us today. I think we're sticking around in the chat room afterwards if you have any questions, as you say, if anybody's worried about anything. If not, okay, see you in 2 weeks' time. So
Yeah.
goodbye, everyone.